The Wounded Healer. As a shaman, I represent a wounded healer. The bottom line is that I have suffered from many illnesses, mentally and physically. There was a period when one thing had not yet ended, and another had already begun. For many years, I strung everything together from illnesses. I even had contracted glandular fever, but I didn't realize it. I used to always keep going without stopping. I also experienced Bell's palsy. What it comes down to is that a main nerve in your face becomes paralyzed. It runs through a small bone channel, and if it becomes infected, that part of your face no longer transmits information. I was paralyzed on one side of my face for 6 months, and it never fully recovered. If you look closely at my face, you will notice that I have 2 faces. I call it the sun and moon side. One side of me appears to be happy and cheerful, the other gloomy and angry, yet the difference is difficult for most people to perceive. It just depends on what you see. For some the glass is half full, and for others it is half empty. Because of this paralysis, I learned to distinguish the difference between body and soul. As a Serpent Bearer, I am all about paranormal abilities. While I was sick, I had many strange experiences with the paranormal. The dividing line between what was real and what was not was a struggle for me. I mentally resisted these experiences for many years, only to discover that I had not hallucinated anything. Everything was real. I won't share my entire history regarding my illnesses, but there are 2 things I want to share. Both things are part of the bipolar disorder. I discovered that you can stabilize this disease. Part of this bipolar disorder is the flight of thoughts. It may sound very innocent, but it was the most extreme disease I have ever suffered. For many psychiatrists, this flight of thoughts is a completely unknown territory. I therefore feel compelled to explain everything in obvious language. After the flight of thoughts, I fell into a 4-year-long depression. I also managed to kill this one in the end. After killing my depression, I experienced a period of manic episodes. It took me 3 years of battling, after which I was completely stable again. I don't experience any ups or downs. I am one straight line. What is very striking is that I can remember little of this negative period. I've experienced it, but my brain has little memory of it. In a way, I am happy with it, since it no longer slows me down in my struggle. I just carry on, as if nothing has ever happened. My flight of thoughts. It was at a time when I had 2 jobs and was studying at university. Shortly before the end of my study, the paranormal went completely crazy. I had a gift that connected me to someone else, and it took up a lot of energy. I had no idea how the spirit connection started, let alone how to turn it off. For 3 months straight, I have been connected to that person. I received many warnings, and this continued into my dreams. I didn't have a single moment of peace. Shortly after, when I finally completed my study, I sank into a massive burnout. All the stress of my study led to my downfall. I was literally handed over the diploma, and then all the pressure of performing fell away from me, with just a snap of my fingers. I fell into an instant burnout. In addition to this severe burnout, the worst thing that could happen was getting into the flight of thoughts. After 3 months of being connected, I finally came to the conclusion that psychic abilities do exist. In fact, I had them myself. There was no point in denying it anymore. This was the moment when I became furious. I felt cheated by everyone around me. Everyone had been lying to me for years that psychic abilities didn't exist, and now I had them myself. This forced me to throw away everything I thought I knew and start all over again. I also realized that besides psychic abilities, many more things could be possible in life. I then started searching for information obsessively, and absorbed so much information in a short amount of time that my brain literally froze. To explain this disease, I will use a metaphor. The computer has a short and long-term memory. The same applies to our brains. My brain got stuck because the short-term memory did not transfer anything over to the long-term memory. The problem was that information wasn't being processed, and it kept piling up. Normally, the computer freezes, and you make a hard reset. The human body doesn't have this safety button, and I went completely crazy. For a year and a half, I was in a state, with a severely exhausted body, where I was struck by an illness that did nothing but further deplete my mental and physical condition. They say it was a drop in the ocean, but my life energy had already evaporated before it could touch the water. Allow me to explain it again by using a metaphor. My body could only supply 8 volts, but the disease kept constantly asking for 12 volts. I literally broke down completely and no one around me noticed. The burnout was not noticeable, due to the busy behavior that was caused by the flight of thoughts. They were two completely contradictory signals. During this period, I returned to work too early and continued on by not accepting my physical boundaries. I wanted to prove myself to society. Another characteristic of the flight of thoughts is that your thoughts move rapidly. There is also no break. By the time you finish the first sentence, the next story has already started in your head. Information in short-term memory keeps repeating itself. The only way out was to talk endlessly in gibberish. It was the only outlet I had. Yet, I experienced the entire illness very consciously. My body was not functioning properly, but my soul was very aware of everything. I simply couldn't pretend otherwise. I have seen everyone around me lose confidence. However, I couldn't do anything to stop it. Everything changed when I ran into an old friend on the train, on my way to work. I was unable to stop talking, and I was freaking out. I saw the relationship break down and everyone around me went crazy because of my extremely busy behavior. When I got off the train, I realized that this relationship was also breaking down. At that moment, I was completely done with that damn disease. It's the same day, and I'm happily at work. Suddenly, a feeling came over me, telling me that I should go home and write down the flight of thoughts. I immediately went to my manager and was given permission to go. When I got home, I opened a text document on the computer. Before I started, I made a promise to myself that I had to write down everything that was going through my head. I ordered to allow myself to forget everything I was writing down. I started typing immediately and didn't pay attention to any language errors. All kinds of gibberish came out, and I was typing non-stop to keep up with my thoughts. I would end up with 12 pages of information. I closed the document and deleted it. That was the moment I finally experienced a sense of peace, for the first time in 18 months. I had found the reset button. The next day, the same thing happened. I was back at work and I got that feeling again. This time I went home without permission and started writing again. I made myself the promise again that I could forget everything. This time 15 pages of information came out of my short-term memory. When I closed the document, it was the moment I cured myself of the flight of thoughts. My head was completely empty. In fact, since then, I rarely have spontaneous thoughts. Instead of extreme hustle and bustle, everything is now extremely quiet. I've gone from one extreme to the other. In total, I had 27 pages of gibberish in my head, A4 size, font Arial 11. I survived the extremely difficult test, and I healed myself by following an inner feeling. It was also the first moment that occurred to recover from the underlying burnout, yet I continued to work out of a sense of duty. I wanted to do my part. I wanted a normal life. It was the stupidest thing I could have ever done because now I'm broken for good. The flight of thoughts would cause me a lot of damage. The only information that made it through to my long-term memory was not stored chronically. Every memory was mixed up. I also lost all sense of time. If I wanted to tell a story, I would start in the middle, then remember that something important happened before, and then end it and start another story. This pattern later returned during an entirely different experience. My flight of thoughts meant that I had to learn to communicate again. I could no longer speak or write a normal sentence after the illness. At that time, I was also full of enormous anger. No one wanted to understand my situation. I'm still recovering in my communication, and it will never be completely healed. I experience many problems with grammar. Sentence structure is where I fail. Still, I decided to take up the challenge by writing a book. What it all boils down to is that I wrote off this disease by listening to an inner feeling. There was no medication involved. I had to endure everything raw. Yet, the misery was still far from over. Self-knowledge is power. When I cured myself of the flight of thoughts, I immediately had to deal with 4 years of depression. I have done everything I could to get rid of this disease. Nothing seemed to help until the moment I woke up with a strong feeling. It was an urge. It was a period where I put astrology to the ultimate test. When I woke up one morning, I had a strong inner feeling telling me that I should study my constellations and put them together as one. The thought was, if they are happy, then so am I. As you can tell, I was completely desperate and tried out everything. I immediately started working it out on paper, and it would lead to a miracle. My sun is in Sagittarius, my ascendant is in Gemini, and my moon is in Scorpio. When I started looking into it seriously, I noticed that I was always a Sagittarius or a Scorpio. I wavered between extremes, and I was never both at the same time. My Gemini ascendant had no existence. I was completely ignorant of my true nature. I then came up with a profession that would do justice to all 3 zodiac signs simultaneously. I literally put them together as a team. Everything I would do would benefit all 3 of them in the same moment of time. This was also the moment that I would embrace the paranormal for the first time in my life, instead of fighting against it. I gave up my will to have a normal life. I labeled myself a paranormal investigator, and then a miracle happened. My 4 years of depression was gone, with a snap of my fingers. The difference in my feelings was so incredibly radical that it seemed as if I had never been depressed all those years before. I was full of energy and felt great. The effect was actually as if someone pressed a button to turn on the light. It was extremely radical and direct. I saw it as an indication from the universe that I was finally on the right path. You understand that I have embraced astrology ever since. I was able to discover its true value. Astrology can heal people from depression. It was again an inner feeling that was at the root, that cured me of my mental illness, just like with the flight of thoughts. Both occurred during a moment of pure desperation. As you can see, the basic knowledge of astrology has had a healing effect on my mental state. I have never been depressed since. I resolved my inner war and was rewarded for it. If the basic knowledge of astrology works for me, then it can also work for you. Self-knowledge is power. With the knowledge I have now, I see what the problem was. During that bad period, I did not use my true qualities. I didn't do justice to the constellations. I wasn't making the most out of the gift I was given. I actually resisted it because I wanted a normal life. By correctly applying the knowledge of astrology, I was rewarded. I finally accepted my gift and the strange life I was experiencing. As you can see, I had to earn my stripes through a lot of mental struggle. I even had to survive very hard lessons and ended up in a world where everyone was against me. The hard truth is that there are hardly any people on earth who can or dare to stand in my shoes. I am also far from popular, but that is not my aim. I do what is expected of me. I do what needs to be done, even if I have to end up as a scapegoat. I have to stand up to the rest of the world as a one-man army. In that sense, what I do is crazy, but I still go for it in good faith. It is a matter of all or nothing.